You're listening to Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Don't run and hide. Don't be afraid. Don't turn away any longer. The truth will set you free. And now, your host, the captain of conspiracy, the prince of paranormal. This ain't your daddy's radio network show. This is Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
All right. Hey now. Let's go. This is Fade to Black. Today is Wednesday, March 12th. We are 70 days into the new year. As always, live from the JP Motorsports Studios right here in Burbank, California. For KJCR and the Dark Matter Radio Network, I am your host, Jimmy Church. That's right. We are live. Let's get this show cracking. We've got a good one tonight. Got a lot to do. You got to love freedom of speech. That's what this show is about. I love this country. Very proud to be an American. Today, singer James Taylor is 66 years old. I've just got one thing to say about James. Love him. But man, everybody has got somebody that has broken their heart to write all those songs. He has his. But it was a string of hits, wasn't it? Love James. 66 years old today. Our dead guy birthday today is poet and author Jack Kerouac, born in 1922. Now, crazy little fact, if you didn't know this about Jack. He was discharged from the Navy after 1 week of service. He probably mentioned the first chapter he was going to write for On the Road. To the wrong guy, but bump. Jack Kerouac. Man, that guy was a trailblazer, if there ever was one. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. You know what to do. Everything is Fade to Black, J Church Radio. Follow us on Twitter, at J Church Radio, at J Church Radio. Now, depending on where you are right now on the web, you can just go over to jimmychurchradio.com. There it is. Click on Twitter. Click on Facebook. I think Facebook takes you to the fan page, which is great. We update it, probably hourly throughout the day. It's weird. Everything gets interconnected now. So, it gets updated on Facebook, which goes to Twitter. Automatically, you update on Twitter, it automatically goes to Facebook, and so forth. So depending on what you like to do, go and follow and like there. We got everything updated on YouTube this week. We are almost up to date. Everybody is still screaming about the second half of the Richard Doty interview. We just haven't had a chance. It's sitting there. It just hasn't been uploaded. We'll get it. Also, I did a little thing during that interview with a video camera. I was sitting next to Richard while everybody's seeing the video. So I'm sitting next to Richard, and I break out a video camera, and I videotape Richard. Take a couple shots of the crowd. But I'm videotaping Richard with a handheld of the interview going on live, and it's pretty trippy. I don't know, about the quality because we have all those studio lights and stuff coming back on us. But I'm gonna get that posted. It's pretty funny. It's got a pretty funny ending too as well. So we'll get that up there, and that is from the second half of the show too, by the way. So it'll whet your appetite, but it's a pretty funny video. Okay, so we'll get to that. Email us throughout the show tonight, Jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. You know the drill. The good ones get through to me here. They do. The good ones get through. break through, pierce the veil. And I'll read them on the air. If I respond, and I try to read all the email that comes in. I really, really do. It's a lot to keep up with, but I do. And if I write back, that means it's really good. What did I say last week? It's Jimmy Church Ego Radio, one of the listeners. This is the most unegoed show ever in the history of anything, because I don't do it. This show is all about you guys, and never, ever forget that. We got a lot of, the world is a crazy place right now. I mean, it's always nutty out there. There's always something crazy going on. But right now, we've got this missing plane, the Malaysian 777, making U-turns, dropping out of the sky, being vaporized. We don't know, but that is a crazy, crazy story. And every day I'm hoping, I wake up in the morning and that's been resolved. The families, I can't imagine what they're going through with this. But then, up on the web now, we've got UFO sightings at the same time. And that tie-in is a little bit out there. But you never know. But it's crazy. Crazy. So we've got that. And then today in New York City, we've got a building that blew up. Tragic. They're searching for survivors as we speak. But, there's a couple of deaths. And that's crazy. And when that news broke, that kept me glued all day. And I just, was hoping it wasn't anything crazy, but it was a gas leak. But nonetheless, crazy. And then to top it all off, we've got this Ukrainian UFO video that's blowing up all over the web. Now, I have seen it. I've seen it many times. We'll get the link up on jimmychurchradio.com. If you haven't seen it or haven't heard about it, go and watch it. I don't know what to make of it. When I look at, first off, I'm going to say this right now. It doesn't look fake to me. Could be, but it doesn't. It's not like that Jerusalem set of 4 videos that popped up years ago over Bethlehem. It's not like that. This is a bit different. So I feel pretty safe saying out of the gate that that's a real video. But I don't know what to make of it. Calling it this super dreadnought, whatever, defensive, offensive United States weapon. I don't know about that. But it is a crazy video, and it is a large object in the sky. I don't know what to make of it. I really don't know what I'm looking at. Doesn't happen often. And if you haven't seen it, go check it out. We'll get the links up. Okay, so tonight we have Mark Pilkington and Roland Denning live from London. And they've got a new documentary that's getting ready to launch. It is called Mirage Men. And the subjects of this video, most of them we talk about on this show and have talked about over the last couple of months. And now, a couple of things. We have a video player up on the site right now. You can go to jimmychurchradio.com. The video player is there. Now, that video player will play the trailer for the movie and allow you to pre-order. Okay? The movie launches later on this month, in about a week. But the trailer is amazing. And looking at the production value and the way that this is being, the way it has been done, I'm very excited about it. Have I seen it? Nope. Can I watch it? Yep. Got my secret private link right here to go and watch it. I didn't want to watch it before this interview. I didn't want it to pollute the conversation tonight. And there's reasons for that, because then I would have been all fired up and all excited, and I would have done the show tonight from a different mindset. It's not how we do it here. I'll watch it tonight or tomorrow after the video. I'll probably be, oh man, I should have watched it before the interview because I just learned this and I didn't know this. Yeah, but that's not the point. Okay, I just don't want it to pollute the conversation tonight. I want their side. And then on tomorrow's show, I'll tell you what I thought of the video. Okay? All right. So tomorrow night is Mac Maloney. Very excited about the show tomorrow night. Mac Maloney, author, UFO guy, but he's also, he writes fiction. He's got the Wingman series out there, and I'm sure that most of you have read it. Great series of books, but a very creative mind. And there's a lot of things to talk to Mac about that I want to get inside. He's a very colorful guy. I just want to get inside his head a little bit, see how that works. Very creative guy. So, and it was a feat to get him on the show. He'll be calling in live from Boston, and we pulled that one off. So tomorrow night, Mac Maloney. Friday, that's right, Michio Kaku. And Michio will be Dr. Kaku. I don't know if I should call him Michio. Dr. Kaku will be with us from New York City. Very, very excited about that. It's going to be another great week here on the show. I want to thank everybody for coming in, listening, participating, the forums. I'm very proud of what we've been able to put together for everybody out there. This is Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I am your host, Jimmy Church. It's going to be a great show tonight. Stay with us. Don't touch that mouse. And when I come back, it's Mark Pilkington and Roland Denning, the Mirage Men. This is Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'll be back right after this. Stay with us.
Way out here, we listen to Jimmy Church on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Dark Matter.
Dark Matter. Dark Matter. Dark Matter. Dark Matter.
You're listening to Fade to Black
on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
¿Qué tal, mis amigos? Yo soy Mario Carson, el tiburón, y los invito para que escuchen a mi buen amigo Jimmy Church Radio. ¡Claro que sí!
Oi, oi, I'm Reese Evans. You're listening to Jimmy Church. This is Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution is on radio. Ciao.
Welcome back. KJCR. Fade to Black. Host Jimmy Church. All right. Now, I just want to remind everybody, over on the website, jimmychurchradio.com, you can scroll down right now. There is a gallery posted, stills from the documentary Mirage Men. We'll try to get those comments in on each one of the picks, but as we do the interview tonight, you can just scroll down and check out some stills from the movie and just follow along tonight. Okay, jimmychurchradio.com, the gallery. It's always in the same spot for every show. You know where it is. Just scroll down right there. It says Mirage Men, and go look at Richard Doty's face. It's right there. All right, let's get this going. Let's get this cracking. Let's see how many times I can say that tonight. UFOs, weapons of mass deception. For over 60 years, teams within the U.S. Air Force and intelligence services exploited and manipulated beliefs about UFOs and ET visitations as part of their counterintelligence programs. In doing so, they spawned a mythology so powerful that it captivated and warped many brilliant minds, including several of their own. Now, for the first time, some of these behind the operations and their victims speak out, revealing a true story that is part Manchurian Candidate and part Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Mark Pilkington is the author of 2 books, Mirage Men and Far Out, 101 Strange Tales from Science's Outer Edge, culled from a column that ran in the Guardian newspaper. Mark has written for numerous anthologies, magazines, and websites, and is a regular speaker at salons, festivals, and conferences. Mark also runs Strange Attractor Press and is the editor of its journal. He has been programming events, exhibitions, films, and live nights since 2001. Roland Denning is a filmmaker and writer based in London. He joined the Mirage Men project in 2011 and led the post-production. His satirical novel, The Beach Beneath the Pavement, which deals with conspiracy and paranoia in the post-credibility world, was published in 2011. His credit on Mirage Men is co-director, co-editor, and co-producer. I would like to welcome to the show, right now, live from London, Mark Pilkington and Roland Denning. How you guys doing tonight? You with us?
Hello there.
Hi, Jimmy.
Everything good?
Yep.
Now, I'm just going to say really quick a couple of things. Thank you, first off, for coming on the show, and I know that you guys are going to have a busy schedule with the launch of the film over the next couple of weeks. I appreciate you guys coming on with us first, and this is a long-form conversation. We're just going to see where things go, and that's our audience is used to me saying that to all of my guests, but I like to get it out there first just to let you know I don't have an agenda. I don't have a bunch of questions in front of me. We're just going to see where this goes. Are you guys ready?
We're ready.
Ready.
Is it what's the weather? First off, I'm in Burbank over here. Another beautiful day, 85 degrees. What's it like in London right now?
It's a little bit cloudy here in Camden Town, but not too wet, not too cold. It's spring. Spring is about to happen here, which is very exciting.
Yeah. After the biblical downpours we had in the last month or so, things seem to be brightening up at last.
We had the same thing over here, weird weather. We had a good solid week of rain, and it was just... And it's weird because here in California, it just never rains. And I mean that. It just never rains.
I think it's advance advertising for the Noah film that's coming out later this summer.
It just might be. I was going to make a Noah reference a second ago, but I let it go just for the interest of the typical Noah reference. So... now let's back up. I want you guys to do the obvious, which is tell us how you met and got the project moving forward. But let me start with Mark and the book, and how did your interest start with that? Was there anything specific in your life growing up? Did you have an encounter? Were you abducted? And and how did the original Mirage Men project kick off?
Well, if we want to go all the way back, I mean, I was abducted as a child by sort of science fiction and fantasy and Close Encounters of the Third Kind and Star Wars and all the things that anyone growing up in the 1970s probably was exposed to. And I just became fascinated sort of in my sort of very early teens, I think, with the idea of UFOs and extraterrestrial life. Maybe I was looking for intelligent life out there because I wasn't finding it even as a child here on Earth. In my sort of mid to late teens, I got very, very sort of deep into the UFO story. So that would be the late 80s, I think, Communion and Above Top Secret were kind of partly responsible for that. And over time, I realized that the stories that were most interesting to me were almost the meta stories rather than like the big question of whether, we're being visited. I was interested in the ways that these stories were evolving and developing, how they were being introduced into the culture, and then especially in the mid-90s, seeing the mainstream popular culture pick up on the subject. That was particularly interesting with the X-Files and Independence Day, things like that. So I just became interested in the way that ideas and the lore began to flow and evolve. And then much later, so about 10 years ago now, my friend and our colleague John Lundberg was making another short film, and as a result of that, he kind of discovered the story of Paul Bennewitz and Richard Doty, and that was the genesis of Mirage Men, really.
Now, when you first heard the story, now we're going to talk about Paul and Richard and everybody else that's involved in the story, but when you first heard the Paul Bennewitz Doty story, did it hit you just like, it did with me the first time that I heard it? I looked at it one of two ways. This can't be real. Nobody would ever pull anything like this off on somebody else. Or two, our government is really messed up, And so did it hit you like that? Because it is an absolutely fantastic tale.
It's an incredible and very sad story, and I think it's hard to sort of throw myself back to when I first encountered it, but I think even to back in the early 90s, I must have had a sense that this was in many ways the real story of the UFO phenomenon, and certainly in the Western world. By the real story, I don't mean that there is only that story. That's the story of the post-war kind of UFO, as opposed to things being unidentified things being seen in the sky, which of course they have been for millennia. So again, it was about seeing the way that our ideas about the things that we're seeing in the skies had been developed, had been coaxed and shaped, and this was the first time that I think the sort of curtain was drawn, and we saw one person behind the curtain. I think everyone else had run away and hid before we drew it. But
well, Roland, when you how did you guys get connected? And were you?
I had read Mark's book, which knocked me out in the same way that the Paul Bennewitz story knocked you out. And I was organizing an art event called The Belief System. And basically, I had become very interested in why people believe what they believe. I'd written this book about a world where no one believes in anything anymore. So I was fascinated by this state we're in, where in one sense, no one trusts anything the government says, probably quite rightly. And on the other side, people will believe in a whole load of wild and wonderful things. And I was running this seminar on reality management, and I invited Mark up to speak to it in Liverpool. On the train coming back, I said to Mark, well, in the book, you talk about all this film you shot. What's happened to it? He says, well, we still got it on the shelf. Do you want to take a look at it? And from then on, Mark and John deposited 50 hours of rushes in my edit suite. I worked on it for a month, showed it to them, and the next 2.5 years with Kypros Kyprianou, we've been putting the film together.
I need to back up for a second. Mark, you had the vision early on while you were writing the book, to get as much of this shot as possible too as well. Were you anticipating making a documentary, or?
It actually, the whole, from the very beginning of the project, the idea was that it would be a film and a book kind of in parallel, operating in parallel. And they're quite different. That while they obviously are dealing with the same subject matter, they're companion pieces rather than just sort of reflections each other. So they each have, the book covers a much sort of broader spread of history, and obviously has more opportunity to explore some of the older cases that I think may be Mirage Men operations. And it also talks a lot about the way that we made the film and our relationships with Rick and with other people that we met during the shoot. So the two kind of were intended to kind of emerge simultaneously, but real life, as it so often does, got in the way. And the book came out 4 years ago now, and the film will be following swiftly on its heels. So, yeah, I mean, the thing to bear in mind is John and I and a very small team made the film, shot the film absolutely independently. We did 3 or 4 shoots, mostly in America, with just one camera and a sound operator. And then we came back and started trying to edit it ourselves, which proved sort of too complex a task. And that's why when Roland and Kip kind of offered to take it over from us, and it was a just wonderful opportunity. And they are absolutely co-creators of the finished film.
Out of the original, I don't know who did you get? Who was captured on film? Who plays themselves?
We've got, I mean, for us, things kind of turned inside out a little bit for us, because when we initially began talking about the film, we never dreamt that Richard Doty would ever, he was invisible at that time. He'd been out of the public eye, or out of the ufological eye, for sort of 20 years or so. So we never imagined we'd ever get to talk to Rick, and we thought we'd talk to everyone else in the story. So William Moore, Linda Moulton Howe, Greg Bishop, and various others. We spoke to Richard Dolan, Walter Bosley, and a number of other people. But as it turned out, to our sort of absolute amazement, Rick Doty, we sort of appeared just as we started working on the film, and agreed to be interviewed by us, which was incredible. And ironically, the one person who wouldn't speak to us was William Moore, who chose, for reasons best known to himself, chose not to talk to us.
This is really Doty's first and last screen interview, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And he's absolutely fascinating on camera. I mean, he's quite gripping.
Yeah.
I would. William Moore, though, he doesn't appear in the film, but Linda Moulton Howe does. Is that what you're?
Yeah. We spent, John and I sort of took us 3 years to sort of get to interview Linda, and we kept asking her and she kept refusing, and we actually traveled to Las Vegas to go to a conference almost solely to interview her, which we managed to do, and she's absolutely incredible in the film as well.
I think Doty and Linda Moulton Howe are the stars, the twin stars of the film. Mm-hmm. And Moore does actually appear in archive material, so his presence is there. But
yeah, we actually have some sort of home video footage of William Moore's infamous 1989 speech to the MUFON assembly in Las Vegas, where he explains his role in the Paul Bennewitz story, and that in itself is an incredible archival piece. And it's very degraded. The sound was synced separately to the video, so it's just got this sort of time capsule feel to it. But it's also the turning point, I think, in contemporary sort of ufological understanding and research.
Yeah, it was one of the most stunning verbiages ever strung together in ufology. I mean, still, when I hear it, it's it speaks for itself. It really does.
Yeah.
What is a Mirage Man?
Well, I'm not sure we can say anyone in particular is a Mirage Man. And we know that I strongly suspect it's a loose-knit kind of group of people all around the world, most of whom probably don't know each other, probably don't work together, except on occasion perhaps they sort of might exchange information. But the suggestion is that these are the people who intentionally or inadvertently, for political reasons, for espionage reasons, for intelligence reasons, or for entertainment reasons, are kind of shaping the way that people engage with certain aspects of reality, especially those parts that kind of blur the lines between the subjective and the objective, the tangible and the intangible, the known and the unknown. And the UFO is the sort of perfect contemporary example of that. They are our sort of greatest living mythological entities, and we still don't know if they're entities or technologies. But the Mirage Men, I think I think Roland and I are Mirage Men. I think you, Jimmy, are a Mirage Man. I think Rick Doty's a Mirage Man. William Moore's a Mirage Man. All of us who are engaged with keeping these stories and this material alive and kicking, I think, we're all Mirage Men and women. But.
Did it all start as you were doing your research? I mean, did it all start in 1950 when Rand had published their first paper, The Exploitation of Superstitions for Purposes of Psychological Warfare? I'm sure you guys have read that paper.
Oh yeah, I'm very familiar with that paper. Ironically, I was introduced to the paper by Nick Redfern about a week after I'd handed the final draft of Mirage Men in. So it's actually not in the book, but it's a crucial missing link between some of the events that I do talk about. But I think it probably began, personally, in the book, I think it began when Kenneth Arnold was persuaded to go out to Tacoma, Washington, and investigate the Maury Island affair. And my hunch, of course, we can't prove it now, but my hunch is that the way that Kenneth Arnold was talking about his sighting of the 9 objects skipping light discs over Mount Rainier in Washington State in June 1947. I think the way he was describing what he saw, hinting that he thought they might be secret aircraft or maybe atomic-powered aircraft, I think this frightened or at least aroused the suspicions of the FBI, maybe certainly the Air Force, and they essentially set up a kind of honey trap in Tacoma to check him out, to assess his loyalties, to find out whether he was perhaps a sleeper agent, not a sleeper agent, some kind of either communist sympathizer, perhaps even an agent. And the thing to remember is this is just a very short time after an incredible kind of culture of Soviet moles had been dug out of very high places in the American political and military establishments. So America was on high alert for Soviet spies at this time. And I think having a pilot, a professional, telling the newspapers that he thought he'd seen secret atomic-powered aircraft or perhaps Soviet aircraft over their country, sort of set all sorts of alarm bells ringing. So I think that's when it began, right at the start.
Do you find, or did you find that as you started to investigate this, that not only did it involve UFOs, but you just alluded to, atomic research and the deception directed back to the Soviet Union? Did you find that, Mirage Men were all over the place? It wasn't just UFOs, and it was just anything where they needed to deceive not only the public, but was it directly related back to the Soviet Union?
I think it's our story is very much a Cold War story, so you can't really escape from that tension of the Cold War.
Right.
But it's not just UFOs, because cattle mutilation, well, that may or may not be a UFO story, comes into it.
Right.
It does go beyond UFOs, doesn't it?
And as Robin says, it's all about the Cold War. It's all about the world after World War II and the tensions and so potentials that kind of emerged after that. And also, I think an important thing to consider that isn't really, I sort of talk about in the book and in the film, but is that we really can't understand how horrific and traumatic World War II was for everybody who lived through it, whether you were fighting or just hearing about it in the news or hearing about it from friends and family who had been out in the war. But the thing that ended the war was technology. It was the most cataclysmic, destructive, appalling technology ever sort of unleashed on the face of the earth. And I think that must have had an incredible psychological and emotional impact on everybody, knowing that it was no longer God's will that we would live or die. It was our own will, and it was in the hands of people who we only had to hope were going to use this technology responsibly. So the idea that there was some kind of higher power coming, perhaps from another planet or another galaxy, who actually had greater technology than our own, who were essentially kind of technological angels who could come to Earth, very much like Klaatu in the day the Earth stood still, could come to our planet and basically tell us how to behave and how to live our lives and be a higher authority than ourselves. This was, I think, sort of a desirable sort of institution to set up, or a desirable what's the word, sort of so it's a desirable state of affairs anyway, to have someone other than ourselves being responsible. And I think there was a fear that if God was written out of the picture, as he might have been, then the extraterrestrials could fulfill that role.
Well, during World War II, we started to deception, spy networks. It's always been there. It's been there going back probably to the Roman Empire, but the Chinese deception. Figuring out a way to mislead, the other side, and then attack or do something else through that deception. And then after World War II, suddenly we had a really, really strong philosophy for that coming out of the Manhattan Project, deception with D-Day and that entire spot. But now we had a new how do I say this? A new subject to deceive with, or which was the UFO subject. So was it? How do I say this correctly? Was there like a training program I mean, where do these guys learn? Are they learning on their feet? Or was there an actual program in place, or were they taking it one problem at a time?
To an extent, I think there was a program in place. From Doty's testimony, he says he was, shown film. He was trained to how to use the stories of UFO to cover certain secret technology.
Right.
Doty also believes there was genuine ET contact. So you have this dual aspect to Doty, that he's both a believer and a manipulator, which makes him an absolutely fascinating character. But if you believe him, and I'm not sure if one should believe anything Doty says, but if you believe him, he says it was there was a deliberate, concerted campaign to deceive people by using the notion of UFOs. And Walter Bosley says the same. So.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, this is by the 1970s, but I think going back to the 50s, certainly they were learning from techniques that they had, that the Mirage Men broadly had developed during the war. So that would mean people like Jasper Maskelyne, the magician, sort of overseeing deception operations, whereby he was building inflatable tanks and decoys.
Exactly.
And
That's exactly my point. That's exactly they had a machine in place after World War II, but they didn't have a reason to use it. And suddenly 1947 happens. And now you've got this huge deception machine there that they built after World War II. And were they just standing around without anything to do? And I get, do you understand? And suddenly, boom, we have nuclear weapons. We have missile technology that we're now developing. We need to deceive there. Now we have UFOs and alien contact, and the two seem to have merged. Mm-hmm. And that's my point. And they were just like off and running. And anything that they needed to deceive the Russians on, nuclear weapons or missiles, or aircraft, aircraft that were being tested, suddenly everything could be deflected into, it must be a UFO. And was that, and with the RAND Corporation in 1950, was this the methodology that they used going into the 60s and 70s?
I think absolutely. And if you look at the RAND paper, one of the incredible things about it, and there are many incredible things about it, but it talks about very ancient deception techniques going back to ancient Greece. It talks about Maskelyne's deceptions during World War II. It talks about the forging of astrological magazines in Germany by the British in World War II. It talks about exploiting all sorts of different beliefs, whether they're sort of orthodox religions or more so folkloric and superstitious. What's the one thing that is not mentioned in that paper that's produced by a subsidiary of the Air Force is flying saucers, and this is in 1950, which is one of the sort of just after one of the great peaks in the flying saucer waves. I think they're certainly conspicuous by their omission in the RAND paper, and I think it's no coincidence that just a couple of weeks before the paper was published, you have the incident at University of Colorado in Denver, where a then anonymous figure presenting himself as a scientist starts lecturing about UFOs and flying saucers and crashed spacecraft and captured extraterrestrials to science and engineering students at the university, after which what appear to be Air Force officers in uniform start quizzing the students who are at the lecture to ask them how convincing they found it, how believable they found it, and whether they now believed that America held crashed flying saucers. So I'd be more surprised if those two things, the RAND paper and the Denver, Colorado lectures, weren't connected than if they were. So that seems like a sort of market research for the RAND paper that was going to be published a couple of weeks later. So.
With Richard Doty, when he has, him and Bill Moore too, but such a colorful background in telling untruths and telling truths, and then expecting us to believe what is untrue and what is true. It's just a weird situation for him. How do we know what to believe?
Well, that's a very good question. I think one way of looking at what Doty does, which is both to encourage and to undermine the whole belief in UFOs, which seems at first contradictory, but if you actually want to take public attention away from something, if you actually encourage a cult belief and then discredit that, that's a wonderful way of taking attention away from something you don't want people to know about. For instance, what serious researcher would now want to look at Roswell? What official research want to look at Roswell or catching mutilation? Because they're being sort of pushed to the fringe by maybe the Mirage Men and people like Doty. So that way of encouraging, building up an interest in something with a certain group of specialist enthusiasts, and then at the same time undermining it, I think is a very clever way to take public attention away from something the government doesn't want you to look at.
Yeah, but what do we believe?
Well, the film, when you get to see it, is what we hope to do. Is once you actually begin to believe something, we pull the rug from under your feet, and you then have to question it again. So it's really, there's sort of stories within stories. I'm not going to tell you what you should believe. I think we all have to work that out for ourselves.
And the film very determinedly refuses to tell the viewer what to believe, and most people appreciate that. We've had a few people who would rather have been able to come away with some certainty on the subject, but the reality of the situation is that there is very little certainty about anything at all within the UFO story. So we're kind of just trying to reflect that.
Absolutely, but this is the thing, and you know what this show is about. So even for me, and with this subject, I'm totally fascinated with it. But even for me, I probably would have sat there, and I know you had a moment where even you just sat there and went, "Oh, come on," where, okay, all right. Did you have a moment like that where it even got a little bit too out there?
Absolutely, had several moments like that, and we also had John Lundberg and I also had moments where, more for John, where he was persuaded that the core story, the Roswell crash, the technology exchange, all the things that are sort of part of the sort of late 20th century UFO legend, he was persuaded by one of our interviewees that it was all true, and that actually threw a real suddenly believing through a greater curveball at us than not believing. And but there were certainly points where I felt Rick Doty certainly kind of crossed the line, and I said as much. And the strange thing was, with this particular incident, I began to believe that he really believed the craziest things that he was telling us, and that just sort of shows either that he's extremely well sort of trained in persuasion, or that this is just a kind of such an incredibly complex nest of or sort of giant rubber band ball of different beliefs and stories that you just can't get through to the bottom of it.
Well, the problem with Doty is he's a self-confessed liar, because he's confessed to manipulating Paul Bennewitz and Linda Moulton Howe. Yep. So why should he believe anything that a self-confessed liar says? Well,
but that was his job, and so that's
maybe it's still his job. That's what we don't know. Well, that's the fascinating thing.
I will share this with everybody, just to let you know how crazy life can be. But I had a friend of mine come over to my house many years ago, 10 years, 15 years ago, and he came over and he said, "Jimmy, there are guys in the apartment next door taping me." I'm like, "Oh, come on, man. Stop right there. You need to eat some food or something. You need to sit down and have a drink." "No, man, they've been doing it for a couple of weeks." And I'm like, his name, oddly enough, was Richard. And I said, "Man, let's just calm down." I changed the subject. A couple of days later, he leaves. I get him to think that maybe he was just going a little bit crazy, that maybe he just needs to relax. It's not real. A couple of days later, unrelated event, I'm with a couple of law enforcement guys, and we're sitting there talking. There was a bunch of us sitting, and they happened to say, when they found out that I was friends with this guy, they happened to say, "Hey, yeah, we've been taping him for a couple of weeks." I was like, "What? Wait, whoa, 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 whoa!" And I just thought to myself, and it was just a weird. The reason for everything, it doesn't even matter. There wasn't anything suspicious or anything weird going on, but he just happened to be in this apartment where this was going down. Okay, but the point is, you never know. And I am telling my friend that it's not true, it's not real, and then I find out a couple of days later, you just never, ever, ever know who is telling the truth. And how crazy a story can be, you need to have an open mind. You really do, because you just don't know what reality is. You just don't.
And that's absolutely so very very pertinent to the sort of stories we're talking about. The Mirage Men story. I think a lot of the time, if UFO investigators or researchers do encounter the Mirage Men, but it's because they've sort of walked into something that they think is about UFOs, but is most likely about something else entirely, and they're sort of innocent pawns in a bigger story, and then that's when they get played, and that's what happened to Paul Bennewitz,
to a
lot of other people. So, they may have thought they were being monitored because they were getting too close to one truth, but in fact they were getting too close to something they had no idea about.
With that, let's take a quick break, because I want to get into the Paul Bennewitz story phenomenon right after the break. We are talking to Mark Pilkington and Roland Denning about their new documentary, Mirage Men. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Stay with us. We'll be back right after this.
'Hi everybody, this is Rob Halford, the Metal God, on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
What's up? My name's Brian Taylor, Ninja Badass Extraordinaire, and this is JimmyChurchRadio.com.
JJCR, in your face.
JimmyChurchRadio.com.
On the Dark Matter Radio Network.
All right, we are back. Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, KJCR, the Dark Matter Radio Network. Live from London, England, Mark Pilkington, Roland Denning, the Mirage Men, their new documentary. We started to, guys, right before the break, to get into the Paul Bennewitz story. And I think, for me, heartbreaking is the word here. When you get into Paul's story and how the deception was played on him. So let's get into the Paul Bennewitz story. But before we do, did you detect any guilt from Doty on this subject? Did he feel bad?
Oh, yeah. So there's moments of guilt, or what looks like guilt. I mean, he refers to Bennewitz as a really good friend and a great guy. And there are moments, I mean, watching, I said, Doty is fascinating because you just watch his expressions. Sometimes you think, that guy's telling the truth. He's really and that moment, other moments, he's sort of twitching. You think, no, I'm not so sure. But I definitely think there's some sense of remorse and guilt about the Bennewitz affair. It got out of hand. I think everyone involved in it would tell you that.
Yeah, I think that is the the story in a nutshell is what should have been a sort of short-lived and self-contained operation became a sprawling mess that changed sort of late 20th century America ultimately, and someone got hurt, or someone and his family got hurt, and that's a tragedy.
And what's one of the complicating factors in a Bennewitz affair is that there was not just the AFOSI, the Air Force Security Services involved, but the NSA were involved and maybe other agencies. So you've also got this clash within the government organizations, and they all have different agendas. I mean, people like to think of the government as this monolith, but it's actually full of competing agencies, all with slightly different agendas, sometimes competing agendas. So Paul Bennewitz probably got caught in the middle of this as well.
Well, I'm sorry to cut you off, Mark, but with Bennewitz, it's like the chicken or the egg. What came first with him? Was it his story or was it the deception? Was it, because he thought he was onto something. So, again, was that Doty from the beginning, or did Paul actually have some type of encounter?
Well, certainly at Kirtland Air Force Base, Paul saw something, and it's something that made an experienced engineer take notice. And we don't know what it is. There's various theories about what he saw, but he saw something to start with. And I think Doty and gang then exploited that.
Yeah, and it's unclear. I mean, it's possible that whatever people say, nobody outside of AFOSI anyway, really knows exactly why Bennewitz was targeted in the way there was. There are now 4 or 5 competing theories, and they, and depending which story you run with, that determines whether Bennewitz saw something that he shouldn't have seen, or, as I suspect, the things that he saw were actually placed there for his benefit, for him to. They were bait, essentially. He was being pushed for.
Exactly. So I guess that takes me right back to my question again. So what came first? So I guess, Mark, you're saying you kind of think that his events were placed there for him to witness. But Roland, on the other side, do you think that he actually did see something at Kirtland, and then that attracted Doty to him?
And there's also 2 elements to this, at least 2 elements, that he was looking at things on the base. He was also picking up, and this came slightly later, picking up transmissions with his receiving equipment. Right. And they may have been 2 very different sorts of things. And we suspect that the NSA got very upset about him picking up coded transmissions from the base. Right. They may be something quite different from the things he was seeing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Here's one possibility is that he was sort of baited with flying lights of some sort that were designed to attract his attention, and as a result of his attention being caught in this way, he started directing his facilities, his capabilities at the base, and then accidentally started picking up the NSA signals, and that's what really got him into trouble.
Right. Now I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. So let's back up for a second. Yeah. Who was Paul Bennewitz? I know that he was a businessman. What was he doing at that time, and what happened? So what was the Paul Bennewitz event first before Doty comes in the picture? What are we talking about?
Paul Bennewitz was an engineer. He had a company called Thunder Scientific making high-tech equipment. I think it's to do with humidity measurement that he sold to NASA, the Air Force. It was his company, a very successful company, and his house was just by Kirtland Air Force Base. He already had an interest in UFOs, and he would watch the lights above Kirtland Air Force Base. And I think the thing to remember, he wasn't just a naive enthusiast, he was an experienced, qualified engineer. So he shouldn't know what he was looking at and talking about. And he saw something that worried him above Kirtland Air Force Base, and he contacted the Air Force Base and got in touch with Doty. He thought it was some security risk or something that shouldn't be going on.
And Doty just happened to be the guy. And now this is according to Doty or according to Bennewitz, I don't know. But Doty picked up the phone?
No, it's not quite. Bennewitz reported it to base security, and that's when AFOSI got involved and that's how we don't obviously know exactly what happened, but Doty was selected as the contact officer who would, not alone, he was with a guy called Ernest Edwards, I think was the sort of other contact at the base for security there. And they sort of developed a relationship with Bennewitz, and Doty sort of maintained that, and from there things sort of grew. But the thing, it seems that Bennewitz first sort of came onto AFOSI's radar the year before, when there was a sort of mini conference about the cattle mutilations in Albuquerque, and Bennewitz was there, and he spoke about his ideas about UFOs and things there. Gabe Valdez, who was the state trooper out in Dulce, New Mexico, where the mutilation, a lot of the mutilations were taking place, he was there, and I think that's where Bennewitz was identified and potentially targeted for the first time as a potential subject for whatever operation this was going to be.
Did Bennewitz? Okay, well let's finish the abridged version of the Bennewitz story. So Doty feeds him a bunch of disinformation, and then the mental hospital entered his life, and I think, was it how many trips? 3, maybe 4 times he was admitted to a mental institution?
I'm not sure.
I think just the one time. That was much later on in the story, so that was 5 or 6 years down the line.
It was, but it's an important part of the story, and the reason for that is, did he have any mental issues that Doty was aware of early on? Was there why Paul Bennewitz? Was it because possibly he had mental problems that Doty was aware of, or not? Or did Doty cause the mental breakdown?
I don't think personally, I don't think they would have targeted Bennewitz if they'd known he was susceptible to this kind of, to a breakdown in this way. I think they saw him at this counter-mutilation conference, and they saw that he was very smart, very vocal, and was happy to get up and talk about his beliefs in a so confident fashion to an audience. And I think that's what they needed, someone to act as a mouthpiece for the material that they were preparing. So I think it's almost the opposite. They thought he would probably be able to endure the operation and would sort of be able to weather it, and that's why they selected him.
Now the big question is, why didn't they just tell Bennewitz to keep quiet and shut up? He was a patriot. He was he'd been in the military man. He respected the government. Why didn't they just tell him to keep it to himself? This is high security stuff he stumbled onto. But they didn't. They encouraged him, and that's a big question. That's where it comes back to Mark's point, that this was possibly an attempt to destabilize the whole UFO movement rather than just get at Paul Bennewitz.
If Doty had in his own experience with extraterrestrials, and he believed it in himself, did he ever feel? Again, I want to go back to the word guilt, because he knew that they existed, according to Doty. Did Doty feel? Did he have a problem with both lying and telling the truth? And how does he? Do you understand the question?
Yeah, I think Doty's remarkably adept at lying and telling the truth simultaneously. He seems to be very good at doing that. I don't think anything in the film suggests that he felt guilty in relation to knowing about ET contact in relation to Paul Bennewitz. He seems to manage to sort of have separate categories in his head. That's what he knows about. This was his job as a security officer, to deceive. I think that's a good question, but he seemed to be able to carry those two contradictory things in his head. He compartmentalized, I think, is the phrase.
Yeah, because, I mean, he's lying against what he knows is true. He's telling the truth about what he knows is a lie.
Yeah.
And then both of those get flip-flopped too as well. And I don't know how it's this Life of Walter Mitty kind of thing. He is just moving along. I don't know how he kept everything straight. And it's a very confusing thing with Doty. And it's not only Bennewitz, and we're going to stay on Bennewitz right now, but it's everything else that he started to reveal and spin out. You just don't know what was real and what isn't, even in his own mind.
I think you also have to accept that Doty's a good storyteller and probably inflated his own role in the proceedings. So he may have been a more minor character than he likes to present.
Well, exactly, and why not?
He's a great storyteller. So I think he wouldn't elaborate. I'm sure he elaborated his stories because that's what storytellers do.
Could he? I'm sorry to cut you off again, Mark. It seems to be my habit. But could he take the stand in court, or would he just be torn apart? Could he be used as a witness in anything? I don't think so.
I mean, there's got to be a conflict. Even now it's clear that there is a conflict within Doty in that he knows a lot of things about the operation, about the other people involved in the operation, and in similar operations that he, for very good reasons, he still won't talk about. So I wonder, he at some point, I'm hoping he will take to the stand and tell the whole story. But at this point, he's bound by oaths that he took when he joined the security services.
Supposedly.
Yeah. But here's the thing about Doty. His story is quite consistent. Although the story seems to be contradictory, he keeps to it.
Right.
Right.
Well, okay, so back. Let's stay on this the Bennewitz chain of events. So Bennewitz then starts to record. He's got some recording equipment. He's convinced that he has got some type of ET communication going on between Kirkland Air Force Base, Dulce, New Mexico, or I don't know if Dulce's involved yet. Hold on, I'll let you guys.
Dulce's slightly separate, but just to say that the AFOSI gave him a computer to pick up the alien transmissions, and this computer seems to have some sort of software in it to decode the transmissions. So he was being fed with stories from the aliens that the AFOSI were feeding him. So they actually placed a computer in his house.
And the rumor that circulated for a long time, never confirmed, is that the computer was delivered in person by J. Allen Hynek, the godfather of modern ufology, and this was like almost like the ultimate kind of confirmation of Bennewitz's importance in the UFO story to have its founder almost turn up and say, you need this bit of technology. So.
And this is what I've always done, is I've always put myself in Paul Bennewitz's shoes and tried to imagine myself with not only these people, but the events that are going on out of Kirkland and these transmissions and the stuff, and just try to put yourself in his shoes, where it is probably the greatest event in human history. Right, but nobody else is. The belief in this subject is nil, but you are witnessing it firsthand. I've always put myself in his shoes, and then suddenly, he gets these transmissions decoded, and he now finds out officially, as far as he is concerned, there's no question that we are communicating with aliens. Yeah. And so in his own mind, I mean, it is just the most, I can't imagine being in his shoes at that moment, and then, but in the end to turn out to be his mind was being messed with.
Absolutely. I mean, at the same time he was flying up with in a plane with Doty over Archuleta Mesa, looking at stuff at the props they'd actually put for him there. He was writing letters to the president and to Washington saying, I've got this information, and they weren't interested. So as Greg Bishop says in the film, it's a case of cognitive dissonance. There's like one part of the government or the security forces saying, encouraging him, the other part don't want to know. So his head is in between these two different places.
Yeah. And if you putting himself at the center of that story, that's, because he knew he was a good engineer, a very good engineer. He knew he understood technology. He was a smart guy. He had been chosen. He was the chosen one, to share this information. He was going to be the prophet, and he was being given this message. And it's very interesting. I don't know if you've seen these PowerPoint presentations put together by the British equivalent of the NSA, the GCHQ, that are basically the kind of Mirage Men handbook that Edward Snowden leaked recently.
Yes.
But just looking at that, one of the principles that they kind of pinpoint as being essential in a successful operation is flattery. And, what greater flattery could there be than saying, we have chosen you out of everyone on planet Earth, or in America anyway, to reveal this information to the world.
Well, and again, if you put yourself in Bennewitz's position, in his shoes, like you said, prophet, the chosen one, but he is without a doubt convinced, as he should be, that everything is real. I don't care how stable or how grounded you are. I'm pretty stable. I'm pretty grounded, but I think I would go off the deep end myself. And I don't know how Doty kept it together, kept a straight face, because he's just lying all day long to Bennewitz. The entire thing is just being fed and fed and fed and fed. And he kept a straight face, just knowing he was pushing this guy, because maybe not intentionally, but you are certainly messing with somebody's head to the extreme.
Yeah. But that's what you're trained to do, and that's what the operation requires. And as a contact officer, your role is to nurture these relationships and shape them according to the requirements of the operation. And that's what you have to do. And I would imagine that this was, in the grand scheme of things, a pretty low level sort of novice operation. For Doty was a newbie at this time, and he was given what was probably thought to be a fairly straightforward sort of responsibility.
And that's
scary. In the film, Doty says, I sat down to dinner with Paul later and said, look, Paul, this is all an operation. We were misleading and confusing you. It was a disinformation campaign. And Bennewitz says to Doty, don't lie to me, Richard. Don't lie to me, Rick. I know it was real.
And back to your point, Mark, what if this was some type of low-level campaign or Doty's first or whatever, that means, and this is where it gets a little bit crazy for everybody. That means there's somebody sitting around, a group of people sitting around a table talking about what they're working on, what their plans are, what's next. And there's some guy at the head of the table, somebody there's, okay, who's got some good ideas? You first. What do you got? What crazy thing can we start next? This is actually planned. It's premeditated, and there are people out there discussing disinformation plans. Back to what you just said about Snowden, Mark. It's obvious that there is a strong agenda dealing with just this subject.
I would, yes, I wouldn't say just this subject, but this is one of the areas that they know that they can work within. That's sort of, as I say, it's one of the flying saucer, the UFOs, one of the toys they can pull out of the toy box, depending on what's required of a specific operation. But in this instance, we don't know whether. We know that Doty was part of a team. We don't know whose idea it was to target Bennewitz. What piecing through kind of corroborative circumstantial evidence, you can sort of piece a paper trail together that involves his supervisor, Richard Weaver, and then the guy who was the sort of head of security for the new stealth program, new at the time, stealth program Barry Hennessy, and I think that's the kind of chain of command within AFOSI that was putting this together. And Rick Doty was he was young, he was I don't think he was one of the architects, but he was gradually, as he was feeding information back from Paul Bennewitz, from later William Moore, then he became more involved in shaping the way the operation kind of unfolded. But yes, they were. We don't know exactly who they were, but we know that certain people were involved, and their heads kind of pop up later on. One of the great ironies is that Richard Weaver, who was Doty's sort of immediate boss, wrote the 1995 Air Force report on Roswell, which I always think is one of the grand ironies. But
yeah, I know. Let's finish up with Paul. But how? Excuse me, need to hit that cough button. How did Linda Moulton Howe get involved with Richard Doty in the middle of all of this cattle mutilation stuff that was going on? And then let's tie into how Dulcie fits into the picture. Oh, by the way, I wanted to let everybody know there are, if you go over to jimmychurchradio.com, there is a complete gallery of stills from Mirage Men on the homepage of jimmychurchradio.com. And there are a couple of pictures there, I assume, are the radio antenna on the top of the mountain in Dulcie. Is that what that is?
I think so. We do have some shots of that.
I can't remember what
we certainly shot. We did go out to Dulcie and shot there, which is an absolutely beautiful place. And we went out there with Greg Bishop and spoke to some of the people who live there. But we weren't able to get up onto Archelator Mesa itself. No one's allowed up there anymore, unfortunately. But
right. Well, I had Norio Hayakawa on the show.
Oh yeah,
and who is great, and
he's a great guy. Yeah.
Yep. And I asked him the same question I'm going to ask you, and right now, when you were out at Dulcie, did you see anything strange as far as entrances into the mountain? Did you see any vehicles driving around? Did you see any helicopters, any military equipment, any fences? Was there anything indicating that there could be a facility there? These pictures here of these antenna, these radio towers, this is about all there is. Were you public, I should say? Were you able to see anything that raised an eyebrow?
No, unfortunately, as I was saying, we weren't able to get up onto the mesa itself. We were just sort of down in the town. So I can tell you an amazing story quickly that happened to myself and Greg Bishop while we were there, which has nothing to do with cattle mutilations or UFOs, but is to do with weather control and magic, if you're interested. But no, we actually spoke to some of the sort of local Indians who live there, and they had never seen anything strange up there, and they were generally kind of dismissive of all the stories. But bear in mind, these stories are now sort of nearly 40 years old, so people may no longer talk about it. But
I'm going to say this really quick. I'm clicking through the gallery. The first picture is the still Roland of Richard Doty, the close up of him. Now this is you guys filming him, right? Is that what this is? This is a still from one of the interviews?
I think that was the first shot you did of Doty, that big close up looking straight at the camera.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, looking into his eyes is one of the most bizarre. Just knowing what is in this guy's past, and from MJ12 and everything. I mean, just and Linda, And Paul, I just don't know what to make of this guy. Did you?
Well, I tell you, Jimmy, I've looked at the material of Richard Doty 20, 30, 50, 100 times, and he still fascinates me, and I still can't get to the bottom of him. You know,
is he off camera? Is he a likable guy?
Very much so. John and I spent almost a whole week with him, sort of spent most of each day for a week with him, and we felt very firm friends with him and stayed in touch with him afterwards. We saw him again on our second trip to the States. He's extremely likable, and you just have to get used to just these sort of strange moments where he'll almost go into a sort of separate state of consciousness and start telling these incredible stories. And over time, you start to learn that they're not real. They're
Okay. Exactly. Let me ask the question first, Mark. Okay. Because you just answered it for me. So. But is this? So you guys are, you're hanging out for a week, which means breakfast, lunch, dinner. You're working together, working relationship. Did you guys knock back a couple of pints? And did you guys ever get like comfortable, mano-a-mano kind of situation where you're getting into another zone? That's a yes or no question, and then I'm going to ask my next one.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So, tell me the one story, because I know he must have just told, fascinating stuff.
Okay.
Can you share one with us?
Sorry, the one story he told us, which was the one night we had a drink with him and that he drank with us. He told us about how he'd handled and operated an extraterrestrial iPad, is what he was essentially describing. This was before we were talking to him, before iPads had sort of appeared, but he was talking about a kind of holographic crystal device that had been given to us by the aliens, and he had handled it. And that was the point at which I called BS on him, and his response was genuine. He was actually, I believed that he believed he'd handled it. The way he responded to me was, and that really threw me. That
it's throwing me right now. Okay, so then how did he? You said it was before the iPad era.
This was 2005. Yeah,
okay, so. Before the iPad. I might have said iPad. How did he describe it?
He described it as a kind of flat, kind of crystalline, solid state, sort of tablet. Essentially, it's hard not to use the word now, but
right.
And that you'd press a button, and a kind of three-dimensional image would emerge, and it would communicate with you in whatever language you spoke, almost telepathically. It was a very far out story. And I said, you're pulling our legs. And he was upset when I suggested that he was lying to us. And that was the emotion was genuine. His response was very genuine.
There's a possibility with Doty, he's become so adept at deception, he's deceived himself.
Wait, so you're saying that he was straight facing it? He was looking right at you.
Yeah, and he was I could see that he was emotionally, he was upset that I was calling him out on it, and I felt that I actually at that point felt that he believed the story he was telling us.
I need to get him on this show.
You should, please do.
Yeah, text me his number. I got to get.
I have to say, we haven't. Although we had a great relationship with Rick, when we were putting the film together, I've heard nothing from him since 2010, when he has the final word in the book, and that was the last time I heard from him.
Has he seen? So he hasn't seen the documentary. He hasn't seen the final cut.
We last saw him on TV as a traffic cop. There was a local news report.
Yeah, which is his day job. Yeah. But we don't know if he's seen the film. It's possible. We would love nothing more than to be screening the film in Albuquerque or
the Q&A session with Richard Doty afterwards would be fantastic.
Absolutely, that would be our dream, and we would love that to happen, but it's unlikely, I suspect.
Huh. Really? Again, the deception continues.
My feeling, I mean, on a sort of, I think the problem is that, the becoming a public figure within the UFO community again may have created frictions and tensions with his day job in the police in New Mexico. So I think that's probably why we stopped hearing from him. But
is Linda Moulton Howe angry?
Probably.
Possibly. She's an amazing, I have to say, she's an amazing woman, and I have utmost respect for her. Even if we don't agree on most things relating to the UFO subject. But we don't know. We haven't spoken to her, but her appearance in the film is a tour de force. It's like the absolute center of the film.
Stunning in the film.
She's incredible, and nobody would ever doubt her conviction and her drive and her dedication to what she believes in, and that's got to be you can't fault that on any level.
But of course, as you're probably aware, she's opposed to some of the fundamental ideas in the film. She believes Paul Bennewitz was seeing strange, probably alien craft, and rather than that being a cover for military technology, she thinks it's the other way around.
Well, but see, that's the beauty of the deception here. That's exactly it. You've hit the nail on the head. We don't know what's real and what's not, and so the deception campaign is working because you have somebody like Linda Moulton Howe. There are plenty of people out there that will testify to the fact that that's part of the deception. They want you, because those really are alien craft. Well, it's brilliant it's kind of like time travel. And stay with me on this. It's kind of like the time travel concept. If somebody's saying that they're a time traveler, and they're from another timeline, and they're back here, and what happens today doesn't really matter because it's in another timeline. So whatever they say doesn't really affect what's going on in the future. It's the cover story for them. In that you don't know, it's their out card, and it's the out card here with Bennewitz and with Doty, with Linda Moulton Howe. It's not her out card, but she believes what she believes, and she will always be able to say, well, that's part of the deception. And what is happening is real. They're going to tell you that it's not, and now they have a guy over here that they've lied to. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It is absolutely brilliant, and no, but you just don't know what's true and what's not. And so much of it really is true. I mean, in that we know that Doty did what he did. We know that Paul Bennewitz said what he said. We know that Linda Moulton Howe was involved. We know that Dulcie is there. We know that it's a real place, and it's the whole thing. There's so much truth to it. You don't know what is untrue. And then the untrue.
I think what we do know is the government is deceiving us, but what they're deceiving us about is the big question.
Exactly. It's brilliant.
And the deception over 60 years has been so successful that it now has a life of its own, as Bob Durant, one of the great subjects that we interviewed for the film, says, the UFO is a machine with a mind of its own, and the UFO story has kind of become bigger than anything that we can control, that the intelligence agencies or the military can control. It's alive. It's Frankenstein's monster.
Was that siren on your guys' end?
That was here, yeah. A London siren, yeah.
That was a London. I'm in a completely soundproof studio, and it was really loud, and I just thought, man, there's somebody. Literally, here they come. They're here. Okay, so now let's how did Linda Moulton Howe get sucked into this entire I know that she was already investigating out there, or did she get pulled in because of Bennewitz?
She was working with Peter Gersten, the lawyer who Chaos, yes, investigating Citizens Against
UFO Secrecy.
He told Linda that Doty had names and information on actual alien contact. She was preparing a documentary on UFOs for HBO, and she went along to see Doty to get information from him, and that's how she got sucked into his web.
Mark, I'll say it again. You can't whisper. You can't whisper, bro.
That was for the audience. That was for everybody.
Okay, so that's right. Now that I don't think that HBO documentary ever aired, did it?
Oh no! Doty managed to trash that project really just by completely discrediting Linda.
Yeah, which was the intention all along. Yeah. I think what was the sort of the problem for the Air Force or for FOSI was that Linda was looking into I think the Cash Landrum story, which was the 1980 Pine Woods sort of UFO sighting by two women and one of their grandchildren outside Dallas, Texas. And I think at that time, Peter Gersten and Citizens Against UFO Secrecy were taking on a case against the Air Force on behalf of the witnesses. And my suspicion is that that's what AFOSI were worried about at the time, and that's what they wanted to kind of derail that investigation.
Or possibly Linda's investigation of cattle mutilation is another possibility.
Real quick, let's take a break right now because that's a good twist. I want to pick up with Linda Moulton Howe, and when we come back, I have an actual observation that I need both of your opinions on. We are with Mark Pilkington and Roland Denning. Their new documentary is Mirage Men. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, on the Dark Matter Radio Network. We'll be back right after this. Stay with us.
La Crescenta, and I listen to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
Jimmy Church. My name is Alan, and I listen to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
He's always giving it to you straight.
JimmyChurchRadio.com.
On the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Hi, this is Rob Reiner from Anvil, and you're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
What's up? I'm Chris. What up? This is Kyle Matthew. You're listening to Jimmy Church Radio, the Revolution.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Live from London, England, we have Mark Pilkington and Roland Denning. The new documentary, Mirage Men, adapted from Mark's book. Hey, Mark, when did the first printing go out of Mirage Men?
That was summer 2010.
2010. Yeah. And again, the vision of thinking that this could be a documentary and maybe it would, and getting all of this shot, hey, Roland, it made your life easy. You didn't have. You just came in after everything was shot. Am I correct on that?
Well, easy and maybe, but there were like 50 hours of rushes, and I had to trawl through this and make sense of it.
Right.
And which was fascinating, but there's so much stuff there.
Well,
and there's, as we've been talking about, there's so many conflicting, competing ideas that you're sort of weaving it into something that.
Yes.
And I think my ideas were close to Mark and John's, that it wasn't just a straight, are there UFOs, ETs or not? Is it real, is it not real? It was actually trying to get beyond that, and this way that we continually tell stories to each other to make sense of the world and the things we believe in and the things we don't believe in. That's what sort of got me caught into the story.
Well, we were talking during the break briefly about my take on the music business versus the film industry. It's all really about the same thing. You're creating something, mixing it, editing it, getting the final product out, and then distributing it. It's the process is the same. And in the music industry, a lot of guys will come in after the album is recorded, then they just come in and mix. Like in the film industry, you got an editor that's going to come in and edit everything and put it together. And so because you're not involved with the creative process or the work, everything that's involved, as a mixer in the music industry, you can come in with a fresh set of eyes and ears, and you're not so close to the fire. Was that the same process with Mirage Men for you?
I think so, to an extent. I mean, I haven't been involved at all in the UFO world, so I could just look at it as I've been involved in all these ideas about belief and credibility and all of that, but no,
Right.
I wasn't part of the UFO world. So to an extent, I came in with a different set of eyes.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's probably was a good thing. And I should also say that we use quite a lot of archive stuff mixed into the... so it's not just the stuff that Mark and John shot. We've actually, we've got all sorts of graphics and archive.
I think the role of the editor, both in film and music and in writing, is just absolutely integral and incredibly important. And I think Roland and Kip, who edited Mirage Men, they've basically turned 50 hours of material into a story, into a film. So it is a very creative process and absolutely essential to the whole process.
Did you guys ever fight?
No,
never.
We didn't actually.
No.
I mean, which is
really,
yeah. No,
don't think once. Really.
No, I mean, yeah, we didn't fight.
No,
I mean, there's 100 different stories or 1,000 different stories you could pull out of this film. So, I think we sort of knew early on we were thinking along the same lines. So
yeah, and I think we obviously one of the reasons we were very happy for Roland and Kip to work with the film is because the way you understood the material and approach the material chimed so closely with the way what we had in mind already, and obviously to an extent, the material we had shot kind of was nudging in a certain direction. But then again, you could have turned it into anything you wanted.
I mean, we were very concerned not to make fools of people. I mean, it's very easy when you edit something to make someone look an idiot. Just by cutting, you can make someone look an idiot. And we wanted very much to treat everybody with respect, and at the same time be critical. But I hope everybody presents their ideas as they want them to be presented. But at the same time, we put ideas against each other so you can actually get a critical distance on it. But
how do you handle
everybody with respect?
How do you handle the sensitive issues of the sensitive issue of lies? Because that's what this movie is about. That's what the subject is about. And so were you ever afraid of maybe lawsuits or any legal action where somebody's could potentially come forward and say, I didn't tell that lie, or I did tell that lie? And how did you deal with that?
How did we do it? Well, it's all been checked by a lawyer. It's all clean. I can't remember that we actually cut anything out because it was libelous, did we?
In just to refer back to the book, there was one paragraph that was deleted from the book by my publisher's lawyers, and of course, unfortunately, I can't talk about it on the air. But and I was amazed. I thought there would be more actually, but there was just one point that they said I was basically accusing someone of an extremely serious crime, and without evidence, I had to withdraw it.
It was a distorting of the legal process, wasn't it?
Yes,
in that case,
yes.
But I mean, people are basically telling you what they've experienced
and what they believe,
So. If
Well,
they do
yeah,
that,
I
there's
guess
very little that legally you can actually.
Right. I guess I'm referring directly to. I mean, Doty is Doty, and he's on the film, so that's that. But I'm referring back to maybe Bill Moore, or going back to maybe Paul Ryan, or the original Serpo websites, or any of the mountains of Jamie Shandera, MJ-12, all of the deception that was, pulled on the public, if it's such a sensitive issue. And I didn't know if you had to seriously pull back reins a little bit and wonder who you could say did what.
I don't. I think a lot of it is now in the public domain. I mean, we know about Doty and William Moore. Moore has confessed, Doty has confessed. So I don't think any of it was contentious.
No, I mean, if we obviously can't outright say, that so-and-so, that anyone in particular created the MJ-12 papers, for example, and there's a great deal of speculation about that. We did ask Doty up front, and he just said he has absolutely nothing to do with it. He was investigated by the FBI and exonerated. So, and I actually do genuinely believe him on that front. The process, I think, that happened was that he and Bill Moore and a National Enquirer journalist called Bob Pratt were sort of discussing hypothetically an organization like MJ-12, and then that material was fed back probably to someone else at AFOSI, or possibly someone else in OFOSI, and then the MJ-12 papers emerged out of that, if they were indeed an AFOSI operation. We don't even know that much. We know that when the FBI investigated them, they spent several months investigating them, and eventually they just received, so almost anonymously, a set of papers from AFOSI, from the Air Force Office of Special Investigation, with a stamp on them saying bogus. So that was the official statement.
I'm confused. Doty said on camera, I guess that's what you're referring to, that he wasn't involved with MJ-12, but yet he was part of the idea.
No, he doesn't say that on camera.
He doesn't say that.
Oh, he doesn't say that.
He says categorically he had nothing to do with MJ-12 or Serpo.
So he put it, or Serpo. Really?
Yeah.
So
categorically. But we do put opposing ideas to his involvement in Serpo in the film, certainly.
I'm so confused right now. Well, that's part of the disinformation, I guess. I don't know.
Confusion is part of the object.
I wanted to get back to Linda Moulton Howe. We're on the subject of Serpo. Let's stay right there for a second. What was, for the listeners that need to know, what was Serpo? What was Project Serpo?
Go on, Mark.
Okay, well, in late 2004, early 2005, some emails began to sort of circulate via a mailing list operated by a Los Angeles supply teacher called Victor Martinez. And these emails seemed to come from somebody who had been part of an exchange program which began in 1968 and sent, I think it was 8 U.S. Air Force pilots or out to an extraterrestrial civilization on a planet called Sinu in the Zeta Reticuli system. I can't remember how far away that is, but a long way away. And this was a kind of exchange with 1 or 2 extraterrestrials from this planet who stayed here courtesy in the sort of care of the US government. And these, I think, were kept at Area 51, but can't quite remember. But the Air Force guys spent 13 years in total on the planet Sinu. And I think some of them died, some of them came back, and the guy who was leaking his reports back in 2005 was one of the survivors. And this wasn't just one document. It was tens of, if not hundreds of pages of material in incredible detail, describing life on the planet and their operations. And whatever it was an immense undertaking on somebody's part. And we don't have the whole story on who wrote it. I don't think Rick Doty wrote it, but I do think certainly it looks like he was helping to disseminate the material and was also monitoring the way that the material was being spread and talked about.
And one of the key things about Serpos is when the internet enters the story, because it's the first real UFO big story of the internet era. Before that, it was conferences and letters and films being found and passed. Now it comes out on the internet.
Mm-hmm. And the other very important thing about Serpo is, I don't know if you remember, but 2004 or 5, I think was the lowest ebb ever in public interest in the UFO subject. It was
why would you say that?
It was, I mean, I was there. I remember it. There were, in this country, several UFO groups just disbanded. There was no interest in the media in the subject. There was no discussion, very little discussion of it online. It was before, okay, think about this. Open Minds, for example, and Above Top Secret, which are now two very, successful and important forums for discussing this material. They only existed because of Serpo. It was the Serpo story that brought them into existence to discuss these matters. So I think up until that point, there was a real strong chance that the UFO subject was going to be over. It was going to be 20th century history. And I would say absolutely with utmost confidence that Serpo resuscitated a dying culture.
Well, to that point, when I the first time I signed on to the internet, downloaded whatever I had to at that time, and I'm talking about 1994, 95. So it may have been AOL 1.0. But the first thing that I did, very first, was I typed in UFO picture. That was my first. I'm talking. I didn't go porn. Okay, I didn't look for my long lost brother. I didn't do any of that stuff or some ex-girlfriend. That's not what I did. I actually typed in UFO picture, and I went off into that thing. I think there was a lot of interest back then this addresses your point directly, Mark, in that there was a huge, because right after that you had so many different events that happened. You had Bob Lazar, you had, just crazy things that were, Area 51 was this big secret thing. And so there was lots of really cool roads to go down. But once those roads kind of ended, and I tend to agree with what you're saying, the interest in, that's why I wanted your opinion, why you were saying that so directly. Mm-hmm. And it did tend to swing down. Serpo, well, not only Serpo, but then so many other subjects started to pop up at the same time, and certainly there's been a resurgence. Yes, I agree. Mm-hmm. Now, back with Serpo, and Victor Martinez and the mystery that was behind it was kind of like the way the MJ-12 documents started to surface. And so I just have to wonder and look back now, was it the same point source, same source of ignition? Was it disinformation from the government, or was it somebody having fun with a hoax?
That's an unanswered question at this point, and there have been multiple speculations as to what the reasoning behind Serpo was, what its purpose was. If it was a hoax, it was. If it was, sorry, I mean, it was a hoax. Well, we don't know, obviously, but my hunch is that there wasn't an extraterrestrial exchange program in 1968. But that's the way I'm wired. But it was a huge operation for somebody. It was a massive amount of work, required a lot of research, a lot of, pouring through astronomical tables and data, a lot of which was wrong, it has to be said. But this was no casual undertaking. Whatever the purpose behind it, it was, it was a lot of work. And it could have been somebody's experimental novel that was released onto the internet. It could have been, as some people said, a piece of disinformation developed by the US or the Soviets even back during the Cold War that somehow kind of filtered back out 30 years later. We just don't know.
But fascinatingly, Richard Doty becomes involved in it again. Even though he denies he had anything to do with it, the IP addresses of the contributors to Victor Martinez mail list all go back to Richard Doty.
Doty? Go ahead.
Well, Doty says, or Victor Martinez says, Doty kindly lent his IP address as a shield for all these poor, vulnerable people. Which, could believe that or not believe that. If Doty, as he claims, had nothing whatever to do with it, why did he get involved in it?
Exactly. And I don't want to sound like I'm kicking a dead, mutilated cow here. But you don't know what to believe. And that's part of the disinformation. And that's why it's so successful, because you've got your head spinning in so many different directions. You've got professionally trained liars. You just don't know what to believe, and it goes back to MJ12 as well. What was the purpose of that? Where did they come from? Doty's involved in that no matter what he wants, what he chooses to say now. I don't want to get sued, but I don't know what he chooses now. But it seems like he's involved with everything. And what was the point source for MJ12? And was Bill Moore involved in Serpo too as well? I don't know. I really don't know.
I don't think there's any suggestion Bill Moore was involved in Serpo.
I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying it just seems like all of these same characters keep popping up, and with all of these, the crazier the story gets, it always comes back to just a couple of people.
One thing, Jimmy, that I found sort of interesting and maybe a little disturbing when we interviewed Victor Martinez was that he actually had known William Moore, back in the early 80s. They'd been part of the same kind of UFO meetings and things in the LA area. So the sense that, again, there was that continuity between Victor Martinez, William Moore, Rick Doty. It's the same.
Exactly.
The same people.
That's all that I'm saying. No, wait, hold on. You just caught me blindsided. You were able to interview Victor?
Oh yeah, he's
Victor's in the film. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I said in the beginning of the interview, guys, who is in the picture? Who plays themselves?
Yeah, we didn't list them all. Kit Green.
Oh man, tell me about Victor Martinez. How was that? I mean, we're on the Serpo subject, so we're clean here. How was? I mean, is he angry?
I don't think.
I don't think so. I don't. There's no reason why he would be. No, we went to see Victor. We spent an afternoon with him. We went out for lunch with him. He's just a believer. He is absolutely certain that everything he has read about UFOs is true. Everything that he's been told about UFOs is true.
What I mean, and let me just be a little more direct. When I say is he angry, I mean he was part of another, disinformation campaign. He wholeheartedly, I mean, that original website, the Serpo, that was one of the most intriguing things you could ever sit down and read. And you're watching this information come in and top secret stuff and, just crazy reading for a long time, and then for him to finally find out that possibly all of this stuff that he was fed just wasn't real. That's the part. I mean, was he angry, disappointed? How is he today?
He ever found out it wasn't real.
No,
I think he still believes, doesn't he?
Yeah, he did not accept that Rick was actually creating the material or was feeding him the material as part of a campaign. He trusted Rick implicitly, and if Rick told him that this was the real thing, then he believed it.
As he said, if Rick had made any of that up, he must be one of the greatest novelists of the 21st century. That's Victor's line.
Can I go right back to my point? Let's kick the dead cow again. It's an amazing job. It's to pull off disinformation like that. I'm not going back to, and this is this is the way my brain works. Going back to my point that I brought up earlier, the story about my friend coming over and telling me that somebody was recording him right next door. I talk him out of it. And then I find out that it was actually true. And that was an accident, the way that I found out. And my brain hurt after that because I was convinced, so convinced that I was able to talk my friend down and convince him. And then I find out it's something otherwise. With Project Serpo, I don't know. What if it was true? What if we find out later that this actually did happen? You just don't know what to believe. And before you want to back off on something, Mark, you had said earlier, I'm not going to try to convince you, otherwise, but you had said earlier, I'm convinced that it's not real. Project Serpo didn't happen. Okay, that's fine. But what if, and that's the brilliant part of all of this disinformation information.
Absolutely.
You just don't know.
I wish it had happened. I couldn't be happier than if we had made contact with benevolent extraterrestrials. That would make that would just be the most wonderful thing that had happened to any of us. But in this case, I mean, I think I think actually some of the other possibilities for what Serpo might have represented are actually just as fascinating. I like to think that it might have been some kind of tracking, sort of had a role in tracking the way that information is circulated around the internet. You drop an idea or a meme or a piece of data, at a very specific point, and then you track it the way that it flows around the internet. That's actually sociologically extremely useful for sociologists, for corporations, for intelligence agencies, for a government. That has all sorts of purposes. So perhaps that was what it was doing. It could have just been someone's half-finished sci-fi story that they wanted to get out into the world, and they would have some satisfaction knowing that they, created a sensation. Who knows?
It has to be said, if it was a major hoax like that, it's amazing that the perpetrators haven't actually been unmasked. I mean, you don't get away with lying for long, do you?
No, I disagree. People... I didn't do it, but no. I mean,
you say you didn't, Mark.
The joy in that kind of hoaxing, if that's the word, and that kind of pranking is getting away with it. And if you confess to it, you haven't got away with it.
Well, this is. I'll address both of your views because you're on opposite sides of the fence there, but this is the thing. With a hoax, I mean, a person can't be a hoax. A hoax has to be, you can be a hoaxer, but the hoax, the story itself, is somebody will always get caught. You can't keep the lie going. If there's other people involved and it's a conspiracy, if there's more than one person involved with the hoax, you're going to get caught. You can't keep the lie going forever. You can't. But the government has managed to pull off deception. I talked about the Manhattan Project earlier. That's a good example of being able to cover something up. Roswell, Project Mogul, dummies being thrown out of planes with parachutes. All of these different deceptions has kept the basic story of Roswell completely covered up. What we don't know what happened in Roswell because the government stayed quiet about it for so long or told different stories for so long that now that deception in Roswell is completely clean. Here we are 60 years later, 70 years later, out of Roswell, and we still don't know the truth. So they were successful there. We don't know what the truth is. And then another example is John Teeter. You guys are familiar with John Teeter.
Yeah, great story.
Yeah, and because of Teeter now, is it a hoax or not? Well, nobody's been busted. And here we are now, we're in 2014, so we're 15 years into the Teeter story. And as complex and as drawn out as it is, that you would have thought somebody would have slipped up and gotten caught. Or somebody would have busted or narked somebody out, and said, hey, I know the real guy. This is how it went down. And because of that, the story's true. Until somebody's been busted, it's not a hoax. Do you understand my point?
Yeah. But like I'm saying, whoever was behind the John Teeter story, which was just a wonderful project that somebody, if it, assuming that it wasn't a real time traveler,
right?
The pleasure is gone once you've told people that was your creation. I think, to me.
Well,
I wasn't John Teeter either, by the way.
But then you wouldn't confess to it if you were.
No,
it'll be your next.
It's the same with. I know. I mean, with John and I, we're
not Teeter.
Not John Teeter. John Lundberg and I we're making crop circles for years. John for many years, and there was no joy in identifying which circles you'd made or anything like that. So
what? Wait!
Sorry, I thought you knew that. I thought you knew
Oh, man.
Here we go.
No, I didn't know that.
Okay. Well, that's true.
Could you tell?
No. I mean,
No. Could you tell that I didn't know?
That we were part of a team that made them, certainly.
John's email address is circlemakers.com, so it's not, it's not
Oh,
a big secret.
I did see that, but I didn't make the connection. No, I did not know.
So that gave us a particular insight into the way that these kinds of deception operations kind of work and the kinds of impacts that they can have on a community. And we weren't working for the government. We weren't working for anybody but ourselves.
Although many people have suggested you are working for the government.
Yes.
There's a lot of stories out there that Mark works for MI5, or is it MI6?
MI6, but it's not actually true. But
well, how do we know?
You can look at my bank statements. You'd see. But the reason for doing them is not to at the time is not to is to create something and then just watch the way that it operates, in the world, how it becomes its own entity, really.
Oh,
were
you guys able to talk to Paul Ryan, by the way?
Bill Ryan.
Or Bill Ryan?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, he was the starting point for the whole film, actually. Not the starting point, but he was the first person we interviewed, and it was because of Bill that we were able to talk to Rick. So yes, very much.
Bill is in the film too.
Bill is there, yeah.
Oh man, let's get past. Let's move on from Serpo, but we're gonna circle the wagons right back around the same. What's the word I want to use? Culprits, I think is the right.
The usual suspects.
Yeah, the usual suspects, and because I want to talk about the aviary, and when we talk about a timeline on the internet, on fascinating subjects. One, like Teeter or MJ-12, the way that happened, and Bob Lazar, the way that Area 51. There was a website called UFO Mind back then that was one of the best, Glenn Campbell's website, and just incredible. So the Aviary plays in with all of that back then, and it made fascinating reading the code names and so forth. So let's talk about the Aviary. Who was the I don't know, the King Bird, and who were the players in it?
I think
you've got Bob Collins.
The actual backstory to the Aviary is that these were back in the early days when William Moore was kind of working with Richard Doty, working with Air Force Office of Special Investigations. He began to make contact with a number of other people within various military and intelligence and sort of government positions, and they were sort of passing him information that he was sort of using to essentially confirm his beliefs about extraterrestrials, about extraterrestrial visitation. Was that siren okay?
It does. It's obvious you guys are having riots in the street.
Yeah. But so the Aviary came about because Bill Ryan and his colleague Jamie Shandera basically gave code names to all of these contacts that they had, and they themselves were mostly centered around Colonel John Alexander, who I'm sure you're familiar with.
Who's also in the film.
Is he in the film? No,
actually he's not.
Not in the film. We did interview him, but he's not in the film. But he had put together what became known as the UFO Working Group, which was a kind of loose-knit collection of people who, some of whom, if anyone knew anything about what the government or the military knew about UFOs, these guys would know, and they became the Aviary, essentially. But what we now know about what they knew is that they knew nothing, and they were all just trying to piece the mystery together for themselves. And they were in positions to know a little bit more than the rest of us, but they still didn't know.
No, I'm confused. Wait, I'm confused. How could the Aviary not know anything when it was Bob Collins, Richard Doty? Didn't they know everything?
They knew more than we did, but they didn't know. The idea was that all of them would have little pieces of the jigsaw, and then between them they would piece the whole thing together. But I think what they pieced together is that they didn't know that that there was either another security door that they couldn't get through, or that nobody knew. And I personally subscribe to that latter suggestion, that nobody knows really what's going on.
Did Jamie Shandera how does I guess I'm going to have to ask you your opinion on this. I don't think there's any factual things to back any of this up, but was Jamie aware of what was going on, or was he merely a pawn? Was he just in the way? And I'm referring to not only the Aviary, but his relationship with Doty, Bill Moore, the MJ-12 documents, and the way that it played out. Was he a Mirage guy?
I have to say we didn't meet him. We haven't spoken to him. He, as far as I know, has for many years been out of the loop, and all I know is that the original roll of film that contained photographs of the MJ-12 papers was sent to his address in Los Angeles. That he worked in television there in the mid-1980s, and he was a friend and colleague of Bill Moore's, but I don't know more than that. I did hear that he got very sort of emotionally and ontologically invested in the UFO subject and came to believe that that the material he was dealing with was real. But I don't know anything else beyond that. I mean, Bill Moore is the really crucial figure, I think, in this, rather than Shandera, as far as I know. But
and do you think so? If we flip everything back around in this situation, do you think it was Doty and Moore that turned around and selected Jamie? And Jamie didn't know it was coming. He didn't know that this roll of film was coming in the mail.
It's possible, yes. I mean, we really don't know on that front. It might make sense because he had television connections. Maybe they thought, they being whoever was behind the MJ12 papers, thought that someone who worked in television would be a good person to get the material to. What's interesting about the MJ12 papers is there were several attempts to get them out to the world that failed, or not several, there was at least one other attempt to get them out into the world that didn't work. So whoever was behind them was specifically sort of targeting certain people to send them to, and one of the first people who was sent them dismissed them as a hoax from the beginning. So
What? Tell me about that event.
That was, they were presented to a woman in this country, a brilliant UFO researcher who's still active, called Jenny Randalls, an author and researcher. And she was presented with the material very early on, and she rejected it. And then it was presented to Timothy Good, who was putting his book Above Top Secret together, and they became the appendix to Above Top Secret,
right,
which came out, I think, in 1986. And that was the first time anyone saw them. So whoever was behind them was keen for them to be seen. There's also a very interesting story relating to this. A guy, one of Bill Moore's kind of colleagues, was a man called Lee Graham, who worked in the defense industry as an engineer in California. And he and his colleague Ron Reger were working on satellites, and they later worked on some compartmentalized parts of the stealth technology, the stealth aircraft. This is in the early 80s.
And Voyager too, isn't it?
And maybe Voyager as well, yeah. And Lee Graham got hold of the MJ12 papers and tried to show them to people at his workplace. And one of the security guys there actually reported him to the military, saying that he had access. He had these documents that were said to be classified that he shouldn't have. And what happened then, which is really, really important to the story, is that he was visited by a guy called Barry Hennessy, who was the head of the security program surrounding the Stealth Project, who came to see Lee Graham and essentially told him to keep distributing the MJ12 papers. So somebody wanted that material to get out there, and that's the crucial thing. Whoever was behind it, they wanted people to see these documents.
Okay, let's take a break right there. We'll pick up with the MJ12 documents when we come back. We're talking with Mark Pilkington and Roland Denning and their new documentary, Mirage Men. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Stay with us, everybody. We'll be back right after this.
Despite popular opinion, reading a book will not make you smarter.
But listening to Jimmy Church will. On the Dark Matter Radio Network.
He's always giving it to you straight.
JimmyChurchRadio.com.
On the Dark Matter Radio Network.
This is Kristen, Erica, Brittany, Gabby, and you're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
On the Dark Matter Radio Network.
On the Dark Matter Radio Network, we are live from London, England, with Mark Pilkington and Roland Denning and their new documentary called Mirage Men. Now, guys, right before the break, we were talking about the MJ-12 documents, and this is, I want some quick reaction with MJ-12. Was it part of, MJ-12 is either two things. It's either private citizens chasing money and trying to make the buck, or it is part of another disinformation campaign on behalf of the government. What say you?
I can't see how anybody's going to make a buck out of it, so I think it's the latter.
I would typically throw a curveball and say it could have been people just doing it for kicks, which is a good reason in itself. Yeah. However, having said that, I'm fairly sure that it had AFOSI behind it.
Oh, really?
My hunch is that it's
AFOSI
behind it.
Wasn't the package postmarked Albuquerque that went to Jamie Shendera and Bill Moore?
Yes, but I think the story, looking back in hindsight, without naming names, some careers needed to be kickstarted again, whether you were writing books or making documentaries or what have you. And then potential books and stuff were also in the works. And having this started would help the financial gain for a few of the figures involved. So, but then you throw in Richard Doty into the mix, and it could be anything once again. And although he may deny any involvement with MJ-12, which is fine, I don't know what to believe, but he is certainly right at the center of MJ-12 once again.
Yeah, he was. I think the sort of paper trail shows that Richard Doty, Bill Moore, and Bob Pratt were discussing material that ended up being in the MJ-12 papers. That we can say for sure. There's also one very telling detail, which is that in the MJ-12 papers, they describe the Roswell crash as happening, I think it's 76 miles or something from Roswell itself. And that's actually, whatever the number is, it's an error that is taken directly from Bill Moore's book, from William Moore's book, The Roswell Incident. So material from William Moore's book is being repeated in the MJ-12 papers that is actually factually incorrect.
I had a guest on the show a couple of weeks ago. I don't want to say who specifically who said this, but I asked him on the air who was the creator of the MJ-12 documents. I wanted to know who did the typing, whose fingers were on the typewriter that did this. And he, in a roundabout way, suggested that it was Bill Moore doing the typing with Doty standing over his shoulder, instructing him what to type. But then you're telling me now that Doty's saying categorically he had nothing to do with MJ-12, and I just don't know what to believe.
Yeah, well, Doty did say that. But the thing, it was a lot of work, the MJ-12 papers. I mean, it's a lot of typing, hell of a lot of typing,
Yeah.
I equate it to someone creating a scenario for Dungeons and Dragons or something, or to developing a mythos. George Lucas creating the Star Wars mythology, J.R.R. Tolkien developing Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit. Someone sat down and created a mythos, a mythology that has become, one of the defining belief systems of the late 20th century and continuing through to the early 21st century. This was just, it's epic, really.
Well, that's kind of a good comparison because the wording, the military aspect, the government aspect, the political aspect of the verbiage, and how all of the MJ-12 documents are presented in a government context, in a military context. Again, I want to say the verbiage that comes from a mindset from somebody that is involved in the military, and that's where you bring in Doty into the picture, and that goes with the stuff that was fed to Bennewitz, this as far as and Serpo and MJ-12, they all come from a certain mindset that you are able to speak in government military speak.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And it just keeps coming back to Doty. I would love to get him on this show. So, before we move on, have you guys ever seen anything you can't explain up in the sky? Who's going first?
I certainly have, and I talk about it. It opens the book, Mirage Men, actually. But back in '95, myself and two friends were on a road trip across the States, and it was on the western edge of Yosemite National Park. And to cut a long story short, we all saw, and I was not the first person to see them, we saw consecutively, one after the other, 3 very metallic looking, very solid looking silver spheres pass silently and very deliberately right over our car, probably 50 feet up, and following exactly the same route as each of them. And we were, we all wondered what they were. We didn't think they were extraterrestrial, but we knew they were there. We could have thrown stones at them and they would have pinged. But the punchline, let me just say, was that at the time I was reading one of the more far out UFO books ever published called Into the Fringe by a woman called Carla Turner. But in the book, she talks repeatedly about these silver spherical craft that hover over her house, and she calls them soul recycling machines.
How big were they?
I would guess not huge. I would guess maybe between 5 and 10 feet across.
Oh, really? And
yeah, relatively small.
How much time in between each one when they passed?
They were going relatively slowly, so we were watching each one for probably 3, 4, or 5 minutes as we saw them come towards us and then just pass over us, and then there was probably another 3 or 4 minutes between each one as they went over.
Make any sound?
Nope, silent, but very directed. They weren't floating. They weren't sort of being blown in the wind. They were very much following a set trajectory. They followed the exact same path. And the crucial thing was there was a kind of rocky bluff behind us. And when they approached the bluff, they kind of stopped. And then at the same distance from the bluff, they kind of rose up and then went over it and continued.
Did you ever see all 3 at the same time?
We saw, the first one I saw separately, actually. Sorry, I'm slightly wrong there. The first one I saw separately in some woods earlier, just hovering off the ground. And then maybe half an hour later, we saw the 2 of them, but they were separately, one at a time, following the same path over our car.
So it wasn't the same craft then?
No, absolutely not. No, it was certainly 2 of them were unquestionably separate. One of them may have been the same, but I don't think it was because that was some distance away. So
looking back at that event now, from this earth, not from this earth, what do you think you saw?
There was, at the time and now I don't understand how they flew or how they were powered, but at the same time, I have no reason to believe they're anything other than some kind of advanced or experimental technology, and there are so many accounts of similar things.
So, Roland, what was your experience?
Unfortunately, I haven't had those experiences myself.
Well, mine, I have three little things that happen that I just can't explain. Now, with each of my experiences, did I see something with windows and somebody waving outside? No, nothing like that. But I had an experience up in Monterey, California, that I photographed. I got one picture of this little black dot up in the sky that was moving really, really super fast at that altitude, and I'm guessing 50,000 feet or something. We're all used to seeing jets move across the sky at a very slow clip, maybe with a chemtrail behind, some exhaust, whatever. But this was different. It was up at that height, and it was just a black dot that was moving across through the clouds. Very, very.
This? Sorry,
this was 1996, 97-ish, 96. And I had a little film camera with me. I was taking pictures at the beach up there with some friends, and one of my friends pointed it out, and I looked up and saw it and grabbed one picture. By the time I wound the camera for another shot and looked again to see where it was, it stopped and then shot straight up into space. This was about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Blue sky with some clouds, California coast kind of thing. But the way it shot up into space was pretty trippy because I'd never seen anything do quite that, where it just disappeared and just kept going into the atmosphere until it was gone. And that was mind-blowing. But we kind of forgot about it. And this was what was weird. We went. Not only did we go on with our day, and just kind of because it just happened in a few seconds, it was forgotten about, and then maybe 6 months later, or a year later, 6 months later, was a good time later. I had a whole fistful of 35 millimeter film I had to get developed. 10, 20 rolls of film that was building up in one of my drawers. So I grabbed it and I went up to the photo place, 1 hour photo place, and dropped off the film. And I went back and got it that afternoon and came back home. And I'm going through, a whole stack full of envelopes of photographs. You know the drill. And I come across these pictures of clouds. I was like, what is this? Why would I take a picture of a cloud, of a sky? And I looked, and there's that little black dot. I was like, oh, yeah. That's right. So I go grab my jeweler's loop. I'm a big watch guy, so I've got a jeweler's loop. I like to look at watches, but that's a whole nother fetish for another time. But I put the jeweler's loop on the photograph, and you know what it was? It was a pyramid. Yes.
Black triangle.
No.
An actual pyramid.
A pyramid. You could see the sun reflecting, and the direction that it was going in, like the flat side was going forward, and you could see the sun reflecting off of it. You could see the bottom of it. It's like a square with the pyramid top. It's bizarre. It's a bizarre picture, but it's tiny. The black dot is like the tiniest black dot you can put on a piece of paper with the tip of a pen. That's how small it is. But when you look at it in the jeweler's loop, then you can see it, and you can tell it's way up in the. It doesn't even make any sense what it is. So that was one. The second event was a very quick one here in the valley. A few years ago, my wife and I just saw this flash of light. She saw it first come down the center of our windshield. And it was a white ball, and it didn't have a fire trail or anything. It was just like a white ball, and just went down right through the front of my car and landed in the city of Van Nuys in front of us. It just like that, just a streak of light. And I thought it was going to explode, and we were going to have this huge explosion, but nothing happened. And so I immediately called around and tried to follow up on it for the next couple of weeks in the paper and stuff on the internet. Nothing. Nobody made any reports of any sightings. And I just know what I saw. And it was, it's kind of hard to judge how big it was, but the way it went into the buildings in Van Nuys, I'm guessing it was, 10, 20 feet across. But again, nothing. I saw that. I can't explain it. All I know is what I saw. I can't really say anything. And then the other thing was last year here in Burbank, I was at a car dealership and we watched this thing go across the sky, spinning way up in the atmosphere. I suspect it was maybe some type of defense satellite, but you could see it, 100,000 feet up, way up in the atmosphere, moving across, and then stop right above us, and it was spinning. You could see the sun reflecting off of it, and then it slowly, very slowly, it took 20, 30 minutes for this whole event to finish, and then slowly went up and disappeared up into the atmosphere. So that, I don't know, that I kind of think it was some kind of satellite that was being positioned over because it was a clear blue sky in the middle of the afternoon. You were able to see it, but it was funny to see it just move across the sky, stop, took forever, by the way, and then slowly disappeared and went straight up.
Have you ever been out to Edwards Air Force Base?
All the time.
If you stay out there at night, you'll see all sorts of
I have years ago. Oh, so what I wanted to say was this. The event that I saw up in Monterey, I didn't tell. I was so embarrassed about it. I had a photograph, right? But I didn't want anybody to think anything strange. So I never told anybody. I told my landlord. I showed him the picture. And I might have told maybe 2 people of the story until last year when I had Steve Murillo of MUFON and UPARS on the program. I told him the story. But people just don't talk. And they don't want to. They don't want to look silly. They don't want to look crazy. And they don't know if what they're dealing with is part of their imagination or not. They don't know. And so people just don't talk. And I know that because I didn't. And like with you, Mark, are you going to run around in the streets telling people that you're seeing silver balls?
I did put it in my book, but hey.
Yeah, okay, yeah, but before your book. Well, look, I'm talking about it.
Then I didn't talk to you.
Yeah, that's that's what I'm saying. Now, I don't know how many people know my story now. I've told it enough, and it's in your book. People know it. But before you put it into, pen to paper, how many people did you tell about that event besides you and your friends? Yeah. I've got some pictures of me when they first revealed the stealth fighter. When it was revealed, I went to an air show where they had one on display. Oh my gosh, I got to think about this. Early 90s, somewhere in there, right after the Gulf War. A few things that I came away from that experience. Number one, it's very small. That is not a big airplane. That is a tiny little cruiser. It's like a Corvette compared to a Greyhound bus. It's two different things. It's a very small plane. The wing probably comes up to your waist, or thereabout. It's not a big aircraft. Second, it doesn't look like it should be able to fly. We know that now. We're very familiar with it, but back then, looking at it, it looks like it shouldn't be able to fly. That was my impression. Third, it looked like a flying saucer to me.
Yeah.
When you stood at certain angles in real life, forget about photographs and what you see in magazines, but when you stand right next to it, it just looks like this weird pyramid black thing sitting out there. So up in the sky, flying around Area 51 or Edwards out here at certain times of the day or night, depending on the angle, you don't know what you're looking at. The last thing you're looking at is a plane. That's for sure.
There's an amazing photograph it's up on the web that I've seen of an early prototype stealth in its hangar with kind of guys with headgear and glasses and clipboards standing around it. And if you pass that off to someone as a captured extraterrestrial spacecraft, you would absolutely believe them. It looks like something from a movie set. It's amazing.
Yeah, there's no question about it. When I was taking pictures of the stealth, and I want you to understand that when I took these pictures, I was able to touch the craft. I could reach out and touch it. I was that close. So I took all of these pictures underneath, from the side, from the front. I probably took 20. But I took some, and when you look at these from the front, with the cockpit and the way that it looks, it looks as foreign as anything. So I can't imagine if I would have saw that flying around and snapped some pictures at night. Yeah, you could definitely see the black triangle tie in there. I know there's people listening right now that are going to say, no, Jimmy, but no, it definitely could have been foreign. Same thing with the SR-71 too, if you can imagine that flying around. Do you think, looking back now, that the aviary was an intentional disinformation campaign put on by Doty?
No, not at all. I think the aviary was a genuine group of people, some of whom had very serious kind of roles within the intelligence and the military culture or apparatus, who were just really interested in UFOs, who were people like us who wanted to get to the bottom of the story, but just happened to have very high security clearances and to work for the CIA or the DIA or the Navy or the Air Force.
Well, okay, I have to ask you an uncomfortable question then, and please, I'm not pinning you against the wall, but I am pinning you against the wall. Doty was Falcon.
Maybe. We don't know.
Okay.
I'm probably not, actually. I think someone else was. I think
I disagree.
Greg Bishop doesn't agree with this, but I think it was probably Barry Hennessy who headed the stealth security program. But
okay, I say Doty was Falcon. So, but if it was Barry, it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, same organization.
Same organization. So again, I'm going to pin you against the wall. How can you come to that conclusion that it wasn't disinformation or government sponsored or a government idea? If it wasn't,
I just think they were, because I think that's two separate things. The aviary weren't creating the disinformation. They were trying to they were trying to extract the truth, to sift the truth from the disinformation. I think that was, they were genuinely truth seekers. I think they really wanted to know what was going on.
But how, again, Mark, I want you to get really uncomfortable right now with how I'm trying to ask you this question.
Okay, I'm sweating.
Which is, if it's Doty or Barry Hennessy that is Falcon, then what you're saying can't be true.
Because,
how can you have the leaders of disinformation seeking the questions of disinformation?
Because the names were attributed by William Moore and Jamie Shanderer, and so they weren't necessarily all working together, in unison, the aviary. They were just the different people who were communicating with Shanderer and Moore. However, a lot of them were also talking to each other, but they weren't organized. They weren't focused in any way other than sharing. They were exchanging information and sharing what they knew, but they didn't have a mission beyond that, I don't think.
And I think people can have a senior position within the government security forces and yet also be minor players in other aspects. You take someone like Kit Green, who people think because he has a level of CIA clearance, he's actually some sort of mastermind, but I think he's more likely, a minor player in many areas, and maybe a major player in only a few. And I think there's these sort of multiple roles that people play within the system. And just like in the world outside, the military and security services, there are people who are believers, there are people who don't know, and there's everything in between. So I think it's much more multi-layered and complex than people like to think.
And the information within those worlds is so intensely compartmentalized. what they were trying to do was to share the little bits of the puzzle that they each had, which, depending on your specialization, depending on your role, very specific role within the organization you were employed by, you would have tiny bits of the puzzle that they would hope to build a bigger picture from.
Have you guys read the Training for a New Generation of Online Covert Operations, the PowerPoint presentation that Snowden has leaked?
Yes, I've spent a lot of time with it. I'm very familiar with it now. Yeah.
Okay, so do you? And I'm so afraid of saying those words and those letters NSA. Just with what is going on today, I'm sure that
they're listening to you whether you say those letters or not.
You're probably right. More freaky stuff has happened with this show in the last 4 months than in my entire life. There are no coincidences. So, or maybe there are. I don't know. But with the way that Snowden has presented this, and now I've posted everything that has been sent to me as it has been revealed. I have got the four out of the maybe 12 slides that are probably relevant from the PowerPoint presentation are up on my site. And is this a continuation of what has been going on with the past, in that now it directly involves the internet, or is it something new?
It's what this looks like to me is a direct continuation, a successor to the RAND document that we discussed earlier from 1950 about the exploitation of superstitions and folklore in psychological warfare campaigns. This is almost the exact same presentation, but repurposed for the internet age, and it's basically what this PowerPoint is a manual for the Mirage Men, as far as I can see. It's explaining it's a training document explaining to people what the program will be to train them to conduct exactly the kinds of operations that Richard Doty was trained in, back in the late 70s, early 80s. And one thing I would say, we don't have the actual text or the presentation that goes with the slides, but there are 3 sides of classic UFOs in there, and I actually think their role within the presentation is not to say that we are using UFOs to deceive people. Their role is to show how people can be deceived by the things they see, how ambiguity can be used to bolster people's pre-existing beliefs, in this case about UFOs. Because if you look at them, and then the slide following it is one of a wagon wheel, like an old style, so 19th century wagon wheel next to a contemporary car tire, and then you have a contemporary, you have an SLR camera next to an iPhone. I think it's the sort of story is something to do with the way that technology has changed, but the way people see things hasn't, is what I read from it.
That's weird, because I got a different take from that. That's totally bizarre that is your perception, and which is just as valid as anything. It's kind of
sure.
But
sure.
I was looking at it more about what people were photographing with and what they were taking pictures of, and interpreting them in their own ways. That's the way I took the picture.
Yeah, that's not a million miles from what I was saying.
Well, I mean, throwing a wagon wheel up in the air and taking a picture of it, and how that could be perceived, and then you have a modern digital camera, and how you can take pictures of different objects, and that's kind of the way it hit me. I understand the wagon wheel to digital camera metaphor. That makes sense too as well. Wow. Now, how do you Why do you think they had the one multiple photograph of the 4 modern UFOs?
I think what they're trying to show is just the way people can see what they want to see in an abstract image. Those 4 images, which are from a very controversial Mexican UFO photographer called I think his name's Arturo Robles, but we don't know what they are. The image before from 1950 is a well-known hoaxed, that's a faked image,
right.
And the one afterwards is very clearly a gull of some sort flying over the ocean that's kind of could be misinterpreted as a disc craft. So I think it's really about how people, like I said, how people see what it is they want to see. And there's actually a slide that says that very same thing earlier on. That's basically saying it's the section is about influence operations. People, see what they expect to see. There's what they call confirmation bias. The information you're presented with just confirms your pre-existing beliefs or your pre-existing mindset. So I think that's the context here.
Okay, so but why? When I posted those pictures and announced that they were on the website, I said, it's one thing for the government to have these pictures, but it's another thing for the NSA to put those in a slide presentation. And I don't care what the subject matter is in the photographs, and you've explained it perfectly. But why? Why? Hold on. Why? Is the subject that they are discussing ufology? Is the subject that they're discussing is lying to the public and how you can deceive the public with how they perceive a photograph, and you can lead them down any path? Or why? That's the question. Why are the pictures in that presentation? Why? That's all and we'll never, like you said, we weren't there. We don't know what the text was. We weren't present. But that I'm very alarmed. I mean, why? That's the big question.
Yeah, I think the why is that they're a very good example of the things that are discussed earlier in the presentation. For example, I'm looking right now at a slide labeled Gambits for Deception, and there's an important one of the strands in that is called perception, and they say repackage and invent, modify old cues and create new cues. So we could look at these 3 images of a 1950s UFO, that's an old cue, and the 2005, the 4 UFOs, and the gull flying over the water. Maybe we can create new cues from there. I'm just riffing here, but there are multiple reasons that these are just useful examples of the ways in which you can repurpose this kind of material. And the fact, while I'd like to say that the fact there are 3 UFO pictures in the slide set, proves the Mirage Men hypothesis, it doesn't necessarily say that, they've been working within the UFO field, only that UFOs are a good example of the kind of deception program or operations that they run. They use the examples they're using mostly in the slideshow are about magic, about stage magic and illusion, which again is just about shaping perception and controlling perception.
Actually, you know what? Let's just take a quick break, and we'll be right back. I'm live from London with Mark Pilkington, Roland Denning, their new documentary, Mirage Men. This is the Dark Matter Radio Network, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. I'll be back right after this. Stay with us.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
On the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Hey, this is Alan Johannes from the Vultures and Queens of the Stone Age. You're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com. Rock on.
All right, everybody, welcome back. KJCR, Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Shoot us some email, jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. It's been a busy show today. And follow us on Twitter at JChurchRadio, Facebook, YouTube, KJCR, Jimmy Church Radio, whatever, Fade to Black. You guys know what to do. Everything has Jimmy or Church or Fade to Black in it. Go follow, like, subscribe, friend. And I would like to hear what everybody has to say about tonight's show. I had a lot of fun with our good friends over there in London, across the pond, Mark and Roland. Now, just to wrap things up, on the website, we have a player that's been put up by your distributor. And so I want everybody to go. You can see the trailer right there. You can, I believe, guys, you can rent as well as purchase.
Yeah,
the
you
video.
can pre-order it. It's
Pre-order
released on March 27th, so now you could get a discount, I think, if you pre-order the rental.
Okay, very good.
I think you can rent and download, can't you? Yeah.
Okay. Now, how has it been received?
So far, extremely well.
I mean, we've basically done festivals around the world up to now, and the reception has been really good.
Yeah, so kind of, obviously we're very proud of the film, but we've been quite thrilled and surprised at how well received it's been and what was very important to us from the outset is, while the film's sort of coming out from within the UFO community, it was very important that it would appeal to and be understood by people both within that community and also outside of it. My favorite responses actually we showed it at Austin at the Fantastic Fest last autumn.
Yeah.
And we had one guy who used to work for Space Command at NORAD, and he was like a techie guy there, and he just came out saying, "Man, I just love your film. It's so, you capture the experience of kind of being in the middle of all this material so perfectly." And another guy's brother was head of, or he was involved with, I can't remember what, but maybe programming films or something at Holloman Air Force Base for the Air Force guys there. And he was like, "We've got to get your film out to Holloman. They'll love it."
And saying this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
If you knew what was going on below that,
He did not. Did he really?
Yeah, not that bit, but the rest of it. But the fact that we can, that people within the military, within the Air Force, also can see themselves in there, I think that's really great as well.
Well,
the only sort of negative comments or reactions were on YouTube of people who've seen the trailer and dismiss it as sort of government anti-UFO propaganda, but they haven't seen the movie, so that we don't take that seriously.
Well, I get 3, 4, 5, 10 emails a day that I am some disinformation guy.
Yeah.
That I'm putting. Whoa, you all right? See?
Well,
See, they know.
The
They know. They know. They're listening.
Yeah.
But it's hilarious for me. Now, either I'm the greatest actor of all time, or I don't know myself, or I'm some MK Ultra super soldier and I don't know what I'm doing. It's possible. But for somebody that doesn't know me to think that I'm part of the campaign out there. It's crazy.
Oh, we get that too, yes, and it's just hilarious, really, if you know us.
Now,
I think the government would employ us.
but here's the $1 million question. Has anybody come up to you after this and pulled you aside and whispered in your ear, I've got, we have to talk?
Not yet. When the book came out, I had a couple of interesting emails from people. Nothing really specific, but people just saying, giving me little tidbits of extra information and saying you're on the right, keep on, you're on the right trail. But
I feel like Mark, I feel like you're holding back right now.
It was okay. The specific thing, which I think is crucial, was to do with the infiltration of the UFO community by Soviet undercover agents in the 1980s. That was what it was about, and how a lot of this material was developed to try and identify them and flush them out of the UFO community.
Were you able to follow up on any of it?
No, I mean, that was something I discussed a little bit in the book, and there's no, there are no names, there are no details, but that was a concern. The concern was that at the time of the stealth program, the Soviets were using UFO groups to try and extract information about stealth. That's basically that's the conclusion I draw in the book, and that was, people just basically were saying you're more or less, you've got the story. But
have you guys been surveilled lately? Do you feel any men in black knock on the door? Anything,
I think we're always being surveilled. That's what we've learned.
England is the most surveilled country in the world. There's cameras everywhere.
Yeah.
We're on TV all the time.
We have more CCTV cameras per head than any other country in the world, so we're used to that feeling.
Do you ever feel once you've already had the book out for 4 years, Mark, but I don't know if Roland is quite acclimated yet to what's about to happen in the future. Once you crack this, you crack this window just a little bit and you start to open and you start to smell the air, it gets a little bit nutty, and it really does. And Roland, you need to prepare yourself and your family.
We got the training program ready for them.
I mean, because it will happen. It's just kind of funny, and it does. I can only speak for my experiences here, and I was warned way in advance. I just kind of laughed. Before I did this show for 2008 till 13, what's that? 5 years. I was a sportscaster. Okay, I retired from the music industry and went back to school. Came out of school and got into sportscasting. Had a not super successful, but I certainly had a large audience and had a great time doing it for years. But in that 5 years of doing that show, I cannot recall my computers ever crashing, my phone sounding weird, cars, people, things, issues. Nothing. That was the smoothest, well-oiled machine ever. And now, since this show has started, it's something every single day. Always weird things going on.
Comes with the territory, Jimmy.
It does. And so Roland, you just be, Roland's just like, I can tell. Roland's a very sensible guy. He's got an open mind, but he's just like, okay, church. All right. Okay. Well, okay. Get back to me in 6 months.
Okay.
I want to hear the story. I want to thank you guys for coming on. I had a great time.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. It's been great.
And I will talk to you after the film comes out, and love to get you guys back on, and we'll chat again.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You guys have a great day. Wow. Roland Denning, Mark Pilkington, live from London. Thank you. This has been Fade to Black. Jimmy Church on the Dark Matter Radio Network. We ran up against it, did all 3 hours tonight. I did my best to get out of here. Coming up next, Night Watch with Todd Sheets. Special thanks to Keith Rowland. Fade to Black executive producer is Rita Kumarian. Show is produced by Hilton J. Palm and Mark D. Kovar. Announcers are Steve Harder and Mark D. Kovar. Music by Doug Aldrich. You're listening to him right now. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR and the Dark Matter Radio Network. See you tomorrow night with Mac Maloney. I'm out of here.